It's one of the most unforgettable images in American television history. A tall, stoic cowboy in a wide-brimmed hat, eyes sharp as a rifle barrel, raising his son on the wild frontier with nothing but grit, honor, and a modified Winchester at his side. Lucas McCain, the Rifleman. He wasn't just a character. He was a symbol of everything a father should be: strong, protective, and unwavering. For millions, he was the ideal, the model, the man you wished had raised you. But behind that iconic role was a man with a story few ever truly knew. Chuck Connors. A rare dual-sport athlete who played in both the NBA and Major League Baseball. A Hollywood leading man who climbed out of poverty. A symbol of strength who, in real life, carried wounds far deeper than any Western plot could show. His journey was a quiet storm, full of hidden heartbreak, complex contradictions, and secrets he carried until his final breath. And one of those secrets wouldn't be revealed until long after he was gone. Today, we uncover the true story of Chuck Connors, the real man behind the rifle. Because the truth isn't just more dramatic than fiction, it's more human. The story of Chuck Connors doesn't begin in Hollywood or on a dusty Western set. It begins in the working-class neighborhood of Bay Ridge, Brooklyn, where a tall, shy boy named Kevin Joseph Aloysius Connors walked streets cracked with hardship and possibility. He was born on April 10, 1921, to Irish immigrants Alan and Marcella Connors. Like many families during the Great Depression, the Connors household was defined by survival. His father worked grueling hours on the Brooklyn docks as a longshoreman, lifting, stacking, and enduring bitter cold in exchange for meager pay. His mother stitched together income from odd jobs, cleaning houses, watching children, sometimes sewing for neighbors. Their apartment was modest. Winters were brutal. The heat failed more often than it worked. Meals were simple, stretched across plates that often seemed too big for what little was served. They didn't own a car, they didn't take vacations, but they had love, and they had dreams. And that was something. In a 1975 interview, Chuck said softly, "We didn't have much, but we had each other. And that was enough." But even in that moment of reflection, his voice carried the weight of knowing that enough had to be taught, not felt. Young Kevin, who'd soon become Chuck, escaped into motion. He ran through back alleys and played pickup games on cracked sidewalks. Baseball was his language. Basketball was his prayer. He wasn't chasing trophies. He was chasing oxygen, chasing hope. By the time he turned 14, his athletic ability had become impossible to ignore. Towering above his classmates, he was offered a scholarship to Adelphi Academy, a private school filled with polished shoes and polished accents. Chuck arrived wearing scuffed soles and the scent of dockyards still on his clothes. "I never felt like I belonged," he later admitted. "But I knew I had to make it count." And he did. Chuck wasn't just a star athlete, he was the athlete. He competed in baseball, basketball, football, and track. Not because he loved the glory, but because he couldn't afford to fail. At night, he would sit under dim streetlights alone, just outside his family's tenement, thinking about the future. "I used to stare up at the window of our apartment and tell myself, 'Don't come back empty-handed.'" That pressure, self-imposed and constant, would follow him for the rest of his life. Chuck's athleticism became his ticket. After graduating from Adelphi, he earned a place at Seton Hall University, where he became a dual-sport standout. He excelled in baseball and basketball, and it was clear he had the kind of presence that coaches and scouts couldn't ignore. That's where Chuck really took root. It wasn't a nickname from childhood. It was born from his own voice, constantly yelling on the court, "Chuck it to me." In 1946, he entered the history books as a member of the Boston Celtics during their inaugural season in the newly formed Basketball Association of America, which would later become the NBA. At 6'5", he was among the tallest players in the league and made headlines for becoming the first NBA player ever to shatter a backboard. But the headlines didn't last. Chuck averaged only 4.5 points per game. The Celtics were struggling financially and talent-wise, and the league was still fighting for national relevance. After just 49 games, he left the team, not because he wanted to, but because he believed baseball still held the future he craved. That belief would soon be tested. In 1949, Chuck Connors made his Major League Baseball debut with the Brooklyn Dodgers. For a kid from Bay Ridge, wearing that uniform was like stepping into a dream. But the dream lasted one game, one plate appearance, one double play. And just like that, he was sent back to the minors. He later said, "I sat in that locker room for a long time. I thought I'd ruined everything I'd worked for." But quitting wasn't in his vocabulary. Chuck played for years in the minor leagues, Montreal Royals, Los Angeles Angels, Newport News Dodgers, among others. His hustle never slowed. He rode Greyhound buses overnight and changed in locker rooms that smelled of sweat and despair. In 1951, he earned another MLB shot, this time with the Chicago Cubs. He played 66 games, hit 2 home runs, and maintained a .239 batting average. It wasn't a fairy tale ending, but it was proof. He belonged. Yet, as the seasons wore on, so did his body. Chuck began to realize something painful. Maybe the game didn't love me as much as I loved it. And then came the swing that changed everything. It was 1952, and Chuck was playing for the Los Angeles Angels, a minor league team. The stadium wasn't packed. The lights weren't bright. The crowd was sparse. But destiny was in the bleachers that night. Chuck stepped up to the plate and hit a towering home run, the kind that made you stop mid-conversation and just watch. In the stands was Billy Gordon, an MGM casting director who had come for a casual night out. He turned to his colleague and said, "That guy's the Laurence Olivier of baseball." Gordon wasn't there looking for actors. But he saw something: posture, intensity, silent command, and decided to make a move. After the game, he found Chuck in the locker room. "Ever think about acting?" he asked. Chuck laughed. "Not seriously," he replied. But fate had already been written. A few weeks later, a minor injury took Chuck out of the lineup. With nothing else to do, he followed up on Gordon's invitation and walked into MGM Studios for a screen test. The camera rolled. Chuck stood silent for a beat, and then something clicked. The same stoicism that made him an imposing first baseman translated into something else entirely: presence. Within 3 days, Chuck Connors signed his first Hollywood contract. His first film role came in Pat and Mike, 1952, a romantic comedy starring Spencer Tracy and Katharine Hepburn. He played a small supporting character, a police captain. But Spencer Tracy saw something. He pulled Chuck aside on set and told him, "Stick with this. You've got something real." From that moment forward, Chuck committed to acting with the same intensity he once gave to sports. Over the next few years, he took small roles, he learned, he studied, he stayed humble, and in 1958, everything changed. Chuck Connors stood on the scorched desert set of a new Western television series called The Rifleman. It was 1958, and he was about to step into a role that would redefine American masculinity and television itself. At first, Chuck was hesitant. The salary was lower than his recent film work, but producers offered him a rare deal: 5% of the show's profits. It was a vote of confidence, and it paid off. He trained with Rod Redwing, a Hollywood gun coach, mastering the spin, cock, and fire technique of the customized Winchester 1892 rifle. He rode horses until his thighs bled, practiced scenes until his voice went hoarse. Chuck didn't want to play Lucas McCain. He wanted to become him. When The Rifleman premiered on September 30th, 1958, 14 million households tuned in. They didn't see Chuck Connors, the ex-athlete. They saw Lucas McCain, the widowed rancher, raising his son Mark alone in the untamed frontier of the New Mexico territory. Each week, Lucas fought off bandits, made moral choices, and taught his son lessons in manhood that resonated across generations. Letters came by the thousands, from fathers seeking guidance, from boys who never had a father figure, from war veterans aching for stability. One man wrote, "You don't know me, but I cry every Thursday night because I see in Lucas McCain the dad I never had." The show rose to become the 4th most watched program in America in its first year. Chuck had done more than succeed. He had become a symbol. But the weight of that symbol would change his life forever. On screen, The Rifleman was a show about strength, discipline, and love between a father and son. But behind the scenes, something even more powerful was unfolding, a relationship that blurred the line between fiction and reality. The boy who played Lucas McCain's son, Mark, was young actor Johnny Crawford, just 12 years old when filming began. To audiences, the bond between Chuck and Johnny felt so authentic, so emotionally honest, it was often cited as the emotional heart of the series. What most fans didn't know at the time was, it was real. Chuck Connors took Johnny under his wing from day one. He didn't just coach him through lines, he mentored him in life. He taught him how to fish, how to saddle a horse, how to navigate the pressures of fame. On weekends, he'd take Johnny on camping trips, just the two of them, away from the glare of cameras. Johnny later said, "He wasn't just a co-star. He was a real father to me. I felt safer with him than anyone else." For Chuck, this relationship wasn't just meaningful, it was redemptive. Because while he gave everything to the fictional son on television, his own real-life sons barely knew their father. In quiet moments between takes, Chuck would open up about regrets, about missed birthdays, forgotten phone calls, promises broken. He never said it outright, but crew members later admitted they believed Chuck was trying to be a better father to Johnny than he had been to his own children. And that heartbreak, that deep, private ache, began to show in his performance. In one memorable scene, Lucas teaches Mark how to stand up to fear. When the director yelled cut, Chuck didn't move. Crew members noticed his eyes had welled up. He wasn't acting, he was feeling. That's why the bond between Lucas and Mark felt so real. Because, in many ways, it was. When The Rifleman ended in 1963 after 5 highly successful seasons and 168 episodes, Chuck Connors was at the peak of his fame. He was adored by millions, respected by peers, financially stable. But he was also trapped. He had become so synonymous with Lucas McCain that Hollywood couldn't see him as anything else. He turned down 8 separate Western pilots in the following 2 years. Not because the scripts were bad, but because they all wanted him to play a version of Lucas. He tried to branch out. In 1965, he took on a radically different role in the short-lived TV series Branded, playing a disgraced army captain fighting to clear his name. The show was darker, more cynical, but viewers still saw the righteous, fatherly Lucas McCain beneath the uniform. Then came Roots in 1977, a seismic shift in American television. Chuck played Tom Moore, a brutal, unrelenting slave owner, a role so morally distant from Lucas McCain, it shocked audiences. The performance was haunting, chilling, and nominated for an Emmy. But even that couldn't shake the public image. "I couldn't win," he later said. "Either I played Lucas again, or I disappointed people for not being him." His later film work, like Soylent Green and Tourist Trap, showed range, but the perception stuck. Directors whispered, "Too Western, too McCain." His own agent once told him, "You were so good at being one man, they can't imagine you being anyone else." That kind of fame is a gift, but for Chuck, it became a cage. While Lucas McCain was the image of stability and devotion, Chuck Connors' personal life was far more turbulent. He was married 3 times, and each marriage ended in pain and disappointment. His first marriage to Elizabeth Riddell began in 1948 during his early baseball years. Together they had 4 sons, and for a while, they looked like the perfect post-war family. But behind the smiling family photos was a growing chasm. Hollywood insiders whispered about Chuck's infidelity, his late nights, and his increasing obsession with his rising fame. Elizabeth reportedly once told a friend, "I was married to Lucas McCain, but not the man who played him." By 1962, the marriage collapsed. Just 1 year later, Chuck married Kamala Devi, an Indian actress he met on the set of Geronimo. The union was groundbreaking, an interracial marriage at the height of America's civil rights struggles. But behind the headlines, the relationship was volatile. Friends described moments of deep love and moments of emotional cruelty. Kamala later said she often felt like a prop in Chuck's public narrative, a way to signal progressiveness while hiding personal distance. Their marriage ended in 1972. In 1977, Chuck married again, this time to Faith Quabius, a former Playboy bunny who was more than 30 years his junior. The relationship raised eyebrows even in the permissive world of Hollywood. They lived lavishly, but insiders noticed erratic behavior, flashes of temper, controlling tendencies, and a sense that Chuck was no longer grounded. By 1980, the marriage was over. His relationships with his sons grew increasingly strained. One of his children later said in an interview, "People ask me what it was like to grow up with Lucas McCain. I tell them, I didn't. I grew up watching him on TV like everyone else." Chuck's legacy as a father was publicly perfect, but privately fractured. By the late 1980s, Chuck Connors was no longer a fixture on television. He made occasional guest appearances, attended fan conventions, and even signed autographs for older generations who remembered the Rifleman fondly. But behind the scenes, his body was beginning to fail him. Years of heavy smoking had taken their toll. In 1991, nearly 30 years after the Rifleman, Chuck returned one final time as Lucas McCain in the made-for-TV film The Gambler Returns, The Luck of the Draw. The moment he walked onto the set in costume, something changed. Crew members watched him weep while choosing the right cowboy hat. One assistant said it was like he was saying goodbye to an old friend. Shortly after filming wrapped, Chuck was diagnosed with lung cancer. He was also battling pneumonia and other complications. His condition deteriorated quickly. On November 10, 1992, Chuck Connors passed away at the age of 71. At his funeral, Johnny Crawford stood in front of mourners, now a grown man, and delivered a eulogy through tears. He wasn't just a co-star. He was my father. He taught me what it means to be a man. Those words captured something even Chuck couldn't express in life. Chuck Connors was honored with a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame in 1984, but his legacy doesn't live in concrete. It lives in memory, in reruns, in the quiet moments when a father and son watch the Rifleman together and feel something deeper than dialogue. For millions of Americans, Lucas McCain wasn't just a character, he was a moral compass. A single dad who showed strength without cruelty, compassion without weakness, love without shame. But behind that icon was a man full of contradictions. He was loving but distant, charismatic but volatile, successful but emotionally isolated. His life forces us to confront a question few want to answer. Can someone be both a hero and a heartbreak? And if so, which one do we remember? Chuck Connors was many things: a groundbreaking athlete, a TV legend, a complicated father, a symbol of strength, and a man who never stopped searching for his place in the world. If the Rifleman ever meant something to you, if Chuck Connors ever reminded you of the kind of person you wanted to be, or the kind you lost, share your story in the comments. And if this tribute helped you see the full man behind the myth, then please like, subscribe, and check out the other stories on our channel, because legends like Chuck Connors deserve to be remembered in full, not just as icons, but as humans. Flawed, noble, and unforgettable.